notes on osmosis. Osmosis is a form of passive transport. And they just talked about some transports in the Amoeba Sister videos that we just watched. How it's moving across. What's the thing it's moving in and out of with the cell? Cell membrane. So this takes place in the cell membrane. Alright, so passive transport means it does not require ATP. What is ATP? Yeah, it's the energy, so it's adenosine triphosphate, and it's the energy produced where? In the mitochondria. Alright, so with passive transport you can have diffusion. That's just where it's moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. This could be stuff moving in and out of the cells. Diffusion can also happen with like gases. So if we were to turn on the propane thing right here and just let it run, eventually would everybody in here be able to smell it? Yeah. You should be able to if you could smell. Because it's going to diffuse out. It'll fill the space that it's in. If you drop a bottle of perfume right here at the door, eventually Hunter and Tristan should be able to smell it because it will diffuse into the room. So it diffuses out and it equals out. So it doesn't just stay concentrated in this corner. It will spread all over and spread out equally. So with passive transport, diffusion, osmosis, stuff we're trying to talk about, they try to reach equilibrium, or sometimes you will see this referred to as homeostasis. This is just basically meaning it's trying to reach a balance. Alright, so osmosis is dealing with one thing. It's with water moving in and out of a cell. So we're just talking about water when we're dealing with osmosis. Now in the video they mentioned the pressure. That pressure is called osmotic pressure. So we know that osmosis deals with water. So this is the water pressure in plants. And remember they said that water can have that pressure because of, or plants can have that pressure because of what structure? Not the cell membrane. What else does a plant have?
Cell wall.
Cell wall. So the cell wall allows it to maintain this extra pressure. This is what helps plants grow. But you're going to see this the most. If you don't water your plants, what happens? What's the first thing they start to do? How can you tell they need water?
They wither.
They start to wilt. They wither. Okay, so a wilted plant is going to have a low pressure, a low osmotic pressure. It doesn't have all the water it needs to help the plant stand up. If the plant is not too far gone, if you've not let it stay wilted for weeks and weeks. So like I have peace lilies in my foyer. They like a lot of water. If you can tell that they are starting to need water because they'll start to droop just a little bit. And within just a few minutes of adding water to it, the plants perk back up, so they stand back up. So we added water to it. We also added water pressure because of the water in the cells, so the plants will stand back up. So this deals with wilted plants. It also helps plants grow. Alright, so there's 3 types of solutions that you can have. With osmosis, you can have an isotonic solution. I abbreviate solution SOL apostrophe N. That's just a chemistry abbreviation for solution. You can have a hypertonic solution, and you can have a hypotonic solution. Alright, so if we have a container, and I'm just going to draw a blood cell in these, because those are usually the one they talk about the most when we're talking about these. So if we draw a blood cell, remember blood cell kind of looks like an inner tube with like a little film in between it. So this is not all the way through. It's just kind of got that bubble shape to it like an inner tube, but then it's got like a little thin layer in between it. So that's what I'm trying to represent with that. All right, isotonic. This is going to have some solute. That's what I'm showing with this in the solution. And it's going to have some solute in the blood cell. Solute, we're just going to say like salt, okay? So we're just going to say this is salt in it. That's our solute. So we have 6 molecules of salt here. We have 6 molecules inside the water, so it is balanced. It's already at equilibrium. So the cell will stay the same. Nothing's going to happen in that cell. No water's going to be moving in or out of it. A hypertonic solution has a lot of solute in the solution. So this water has a lot of salt in it, and the blood cell doesn't really have a whole lot in it. So in osmosis, water moves from the area where it's the most pure. So basically what the water's trying to do is trying to balance out this highly concentrated salt water. So it's going to start giving just plain water molecules, trying to balance out that solute to solvent ratio. So since there's a lot of solute here and not a lot in the red blood cell, water's going to move out of the red blood cell into the solution. So water's going to leave the cell. So water moves out of the cell. What's that going to cause the cell to do?
Die.
It's going to shrink. Okay, so the cell will shrink. So a lot of times you'll see little diagrams that it'll show the red blood cell, and then it'll show it to like this little collapsed looking cell. So basically you sucked all the water out of it. It's just kind of caved in on itself. Okay, hypotonic solution. You're going to have a lot of concentration of solute in the cell. and not a whole lot in the water or in the solution that's around it. So this is more pure water. This is like more salty in the cell. So water's going to move to where it's the purest, to where it's trying to balance out, where it's like the saltiest. So for this one, water's going to move where?
Into the cell.
Into the cell. So this has a lot of solute in the cell, not the solution. So water's going to move into the cell. So if you're pumping water into the cell, what's that cell going to do?
Inflate.
Yeah, it's going to inflate. It's going to swell up. So this cell will swell. Okay? So instead of it being this little red blood cell, it's got the little bubbles on the outside and then it's thinner in the center, it's just going to move into being this really puffed out cell all over. Okay, if you get confused about hyper and hypo, the O in hypo should tell you that it swells up to a big round circle. Okay, hyper is a little collapsed cell. The E sort of collapsed in that. So hypo makes it swell into a big circle, a big O. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples. If we have let's say that this is salt water, and we're going to drop a freshwater fish in it. Okay, so he's freshwater. What's going to happen?
It's gonna die.
But what's going to happen? Why? Why is he going to die?
Because it's the
Because it
freshwater
don't.
fish.
In terms of osmosis, why is he going to die?
All the water in the cells are gonna get sucked out of it.
All the water in his freshwater cells are going to go out into this salt water. So his cells are going to do what? Yeah, he's just going to kind of shrivel up. So he's going to shrivel and probably die. Okay, if we have another container, and we've got water in here, but this is going to be our fresh water. And we're going to put a saltwater plant in the fresh water. What's going to happen? How's the water going to move?
It's gonna move it plant cells all up.
It's going to move into the plant cells because this is a fresh water, so it's trying to balance out this salt. So it's going to move into the plant, which means the plant cells will swell. More than likely, that plant is not going to live in it. It might live for a little while, but if it keeps getting water pushed into it, it's going to rupture the cells. So you can't really mix saltwater fish or plants and fresh water. They just don't really go back and forth. Now, they did mention there are some animals that are adapted to being able to take different concentrations of salt and fresh water. What was an example they gave in the video?
Salmon.
Yeah, so like a salmon lives where the majority of its life?
The ocean.
In the ocean, and then where does it go to spawn?
The rivers.
In the rivers, so it has to do that. There are some sharks that can do that. Have you ever heard of like the bull shark being in the Mississippi River?
Allegedly.
So, yeah.
What about brackish water?
Brackish water, usually animals that live in brackish water, like that's their thing. But they have this concentration gradient stuff worked out where they can switch back and forth from saltier or from more fresh. All right, a couple more things just to mention, and I think they went over it in the video. There are other ways to move in and out. There are ion channels in the cell membrane. These are just to move important ions in and out. Okay, so this would be like sodium and potassium. Your muscle cells work off of something called a sodium potassium pump. So it's constantly pumping sodium and potassium. Trying to keep it at equilibrium. So that's why it's not good for you if you get too much sodium in your system. Then it's going to make you have problems, especially with your muscles. You can get too much potassium. You can not get enough potassium. If you don't have enough potassium, what are you supposed to do? Eat a banana. And that will regulate the amount of potassium you have. So you have sodium potassium pumps, other ions that move in and out. There's calcium ions, there's chlorine ions, just to name a few. So these are important for muscles. They're also important for nerve cells to keep that electrical gradient going. But your cell membrane has ion channels in it. So these are just little openings specifically designed for these ions where they can move in and out of the cell. Okay, so it doesn't have to have something opening it up physically like a door. That would be active transport. This is still passive transport because it's not requiring energy to go in and out. It can just do this across the cell membrane with no energy. Okay? All right, there is one last type of diffusion. It's called facilitated diffusion. What does facilitated mean?
Like a facility,
Like a central place.
If somebody is facilitating something, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Like watching.
Yeah, they're like watching, they're like helping. So a facilitated diffusion is where you have a helper protein. It's called a carrier protein. That helps move stuff in and out. So basically this little protein is just attached in the cell membrane, and it's just there, like this stuff will kind of gravitate toward it and that'll help push it on through. But it's not requiring energy. Okay, any questions about those?